Welcome to Gray Overload. And AMD had their Computex announcements. The 9060 XT is coming out July 5th. I think that this is going to be a card AMD is going to be targeting, especially for that entry. I really think it's, entry mid-range, right? I think more of their entry now. They're trying to get some of their APUs be that entry, but they're going to have an 8 and a 16 gig version of this card. Well, one's going to be $299 for the 8 gig, which I think is $100 too expensive. They're also going to have that 9060 16 gig for $350. Now, that they compared it to the 5060 Ti 8 gig there, and it competes. Now, while that could have maybe been a valid, the competition between the two comparison there, I think they should have went with the 16 gig. That MSRP of that 5060 Ti 8 gig is 379 to so 380 bucks. This is going to be 349 bucks, 350. So it's a close enough to show the performance difference there. But I think that they would have had a better, more positive showing, I think, from the press if they would have just not compared it like that. I also think that they should have had that 8 gig model be called the 9060. I think that would have been a perfectly reasonable way to do this. Have a 9060, which was an 8 gig, and the 9060 Ti or Ti. Whoop, this is not Nvidia. 9060 XT and a 16 gig model. I think that would have been a good comparison. Then people would have known the difference, and you wouldn't have had to worry about if they need this. Now, the 350 bucks, you could be arguing, that may be a little rich here. The way the GPU market is, it's got to iron itself out a little bit right now. We need to have supply in there and kind of see where this sits. But for 350 bucks, is this a GPU now that you can go through and say, yeah, it competes, it's better than the consoles, and this is, current consoles right now for 350 bucks? Can you build a computer around that for close to 700 bucks for the for comparison with the consoles? I think we're getting there. Now, there's other technology like, FSR DLSS that may help you get there with an 8 gig frame buffer, but I really think that if you're doing 8 gigs right now, that's a $199 card. Maybe Intel is able to compete a little bit with the B570, the B580 to kind of put pressure to make those 8 gig cards obsolete in the 5060 and the 9060 XT 8 gigabyte. If that's the case, because they have 10 and 12 gigs respectively for those two cards, this may not matter as much. Maybe people go that route. Again, you have the Intel issues with drivers, making sure that's all ironed out. But this is the one thing where I really would have liked to seen just more from AMD here. While I think that this is going to be a good overall solid graphics card, if you did that at 320, 310, I think came in at maybe even 299 for that card, really took it to Nvidia, I think you would have sold a lot of them, and then put that, well, if you had 299 and then 199, I think you would have been able to really attack the market where you have a little advantage right now. From what I'm hearing and seeing about things of how sales are going, this could be a really good thing, way AMD's building momentum. Would have been kind of cool to see, but I get it, AMD's got to make some money on these, so I don't know where all the margins are at all in any of this. I don't know how much different 8 gigs of RAM is. It's only $50 difference, so is the 8 gig model, is the margin still the same? I'm guessing on those two, right? So, but you got PCI 5.0, PCI Express 5.0, by 16 on these cards. I really like the by 16. I think that is a great option that AMD took, especially if you throw this on an older board that maybe is 3.0 or 4.0. You get all by 16 instead of by 8, which then the bandwidth is limited. So you don't have to buy the latest and greatest boards for these to get the full performance. At least this is where I like to have a board to be able to test this out, a card, because then you can start seeing there is a difference, right? Game clock is clocked a little bit higher than the 9070 series cards, so they're able to get a little bit more performance on them. It's about 150 watts to 185 watts, depending upon your configuration. So, I mean, you start throwing this in together. I was thinking about this because I'm thinking about trying to build a PC maybe later this year. We're going to go for like a console type PC. So not, top of the line or anything like that, but let's have, $700 here and let's try to, you know, be able to get a PC as close to that. Maybe you have to go to 800 or something there, but 350 of that, if you're at 700 bucks, that's half of it for a graphics card, which fine, it puts you a little constraint there for CPU memory, motherboard, storage, power supply, and case, right? So you have 5 more things to get at least to get that all set up. But I've been looking at some stuff for that, and maybe you're going with a 6 core, maybe a 7600 if you want to get into the AM5 platform, which isn't a bad platform to buy into at an entry level area. Still give you some room to upgrade if you want to do that. There's certain things like this where I'm looking at this card of being, can you be able to make a console equivalent, computer for the price of a console? Can you do something like that? Can you get close? Because that's the kind of the tipping factor of, maybe of what some people might want to do. And that's where I like to see this down more towards that $300 range, and then you drop the 8 gig. Because I think if you're doing something for gaming to replace a console, I think you need to be at 16, especially where games are today, 16 gig frame buffer. And I think that's where it should be. June 5th, I guess, is the release date for these. So we get to have fun and see that release. Now, FSR Redstone, man, Redzone, yeah, we're not here, but Redstone, right? This is going to be an interesting little compute side of it. So there's, more AI stuff inside of that compute area of FSR4. That's FSR4 is going to be out for more games here, and I think that what they're doing is just trying to continue to chip away at where Nvidia is with DLSS, and I think that's a good thing, right? You're going to have, by June 5th, they're saying 60 games of FSR4, and the FSR Redstone is going to be, they say powered by machine learning, right? And their slide. But neural radiance caching, machine learning acceleration of ray regeneration, and machine learning acceleration frame generation. So we'll see this, how this all performs. If you're making quality and improving quality and getting it playable for these, especially these devices that are not top of the line, right? I think on top of the line, let's run native. Let's get that to be running tip-top shape, right? That's kind of how I like to see this. Granted, these technologies will work on it, but I think you can do a lot with some and take advantage of some of the hardware. Make sure you're rocking out that hardware, right? Can it run it? But these other technologies, this FSR, DLSS, XESS, right? You add these on top for your handhelds, for your entry-level cards to make them get closer up to where the frame rate and quality is that people want. Now, I am not a huge proponent of supporting multi-frame gen right now. I think that there's downsides to it. I like to see maybe do a dynamic resolution where you're grabbing dynamic resolutions and generating those frames to, doing the upscaling side of things to be able to get to a certain frame rate. I think that would be kind of interesting to do. I think it would make testing absolutely a nightmare to try to figure that out. But let's say you're trying to hit a certain frame rate and you do these different generations or dynamic resolutions to be able to generate the frame to be able to upscale it. I think that would be something where it'd be kind of interesting to see what they can do with that rather than trying to generate frames inside of, just between frames that are actually calculated. So there's Redstone there, so that's pretty interesting. Of coming second half of this year, you also have them talking about their new R9700 Pro card. So of course they called it AI, like everyone's going after AI this, AI. Come on, it's such poor naming scheme by AMD. You had, your Pro cards that, can do AI, as soon as AI, let's say you have an AI crash, and now you have a whole bunch of products named AI. It's just, let the product stand on itself, and let's see what it can be used for, right? So 32 gigs of RAM, they kind of showed this against a 5080 to see how it can perform against that. Now 5080 is 16 gigs of RAM on there versus 32, so the AMD card does have some advantages there with these AI models. That's, I, I would have actually liked to seen it against a 5090 with 32 gigs. See where that ends up. I'm guessing it's not going to be as close because they didn't go through that unless they don't have a 5090. That could be the case. Nobody has one of those right now. So uh, that is that to me is something that I like to see more of, these calculations. But if you're in a pro workload, this is something that does make a lot of sense. Now, they did talk about ROCm a little bit, which I think is very much important, right? For they're going to bring ROCm to Windows. They're going to make sure ROCm is on the Ryzen AI Max, which if you're calling it AI, you better have your whole software stack on it. This is why I think they really messed up, because they'll have it ROCm on the Pro Series AI, right? And they're going to also bring it to their clients. So all this stuff will be brought together, and this is really how you kind of build out and make sure that there are developers out there, right, like me, that go through and I want my personal hardware to be able to do stuff on it. And as I do stuff on it, I like it, it works well. That's something I can bring into my professional workloads and even say, you know what, I like to see hardware like this, so I can be able to develop and we can support this hardware that may be out there and it works quite well. And that's something that people that just decide to develop for fun outside of their day jobs or whatever, they bring it to work. It's kind of how that whole progression works. Oh, this is a good product. They recommend it at work. They kind of do the testing there, and they see where stuff goes, right? This is where AMD needed to get to. It's how CUDA really took off. A lot of Nvidia graphics cards out there, right? A lot of people have it, and guess what? Everyone started using it because it was right there. You could use CUDA, right? You had CUDA on your machine. Granted, there were some times where it wasn't as much as the Pro cards, but you still had it. You still were able to use it. And now AMD's finally getting there. It took them long enough, but better late than never. And it's been quite late. So uh, we're going to end on the fun topic, which is Threadripper. I think Zen 5 Threadripper, kind of the last of the Zen 5 here being announced, released. We're going to have, the regular DIY market, HEDT, with up to 64 cores there of what do they call this? Shimada Peak is what the code name is. So really kind of cool, 350 watt, 64 cores, and 128 threads, 5.4 gig boost. You get that socket, the STR5 socket, and you'll be off to the races. But if you want to go with their WX line, their Pro Threadripper line, you can get a WX 9995, the 96 cores, 192 threads. So you can have a really, really huge core count there. The Pro line goes all the way down to 12 cores, where the HDT line only goes down to 24 cores, which, depending upon what Zen 6 does, let's say the desktop, AM5, I'm guessing they're going to stick with it, or AM6 goes up to like 24 cores there, maybe eventually gets those 32. A lot of the HEDT stuff might, start being like, do what we need to have an HEDT line, right? The high-end desktop line, or do we just start going towards having a Pro line for Threadripper? And I think the Pro line still makes sense. There's a workstation line that still people use to this day. As desktops, core counts continue to increase, will that go away at some point? Maybe, but you still have servers, and there's still going to be some workloads where you get quad channel, right, memory on these. So you start looking at some of these kits. Let's say you got two 512 kits right there, a terabyte of memory, And let's say you're running a certain production software, or solver software or something like that, that needs a lot of memory, a lot of RAM. Uh, RAM is memory. Whew, my brain is fried here. But you can start seeing where these are going towards, and it'd be really cool if you had a whole uh, 3D X3D model of these. That would be probably really expensive, but it would be fun to see and fun to test. At least I would have fun doing it. So that AMD's got some products here. We'll see where they're kind of, they all go with the GPU side of things. I want that competition in the GPU. I want to be able to deliver on that. One thing I've been focusing on here, AM5 has been out for a while, so that's not a, focus right now with all this, because we're gearing up to see what AMD is going to do next. The X3D chips out are still crushing it. I saw the price of the 9950 X3D finally get a little bit more reasonable. That was up there for a while. I know it was well over $1,000 on Amazon for a little bit when I was checking that price. So, you kind of see some of these things. You see where AMD's going, and hopefully they can continue and give consumers products that they've been waiting for, and for price points that we need. So if we can get the 9060 XTs in stock, keep them in stock, keep them close to MSRP, this might be a card that finally makes some, get some people out there buying. I know we all want faster cards and cheaper cards, but let's just try to get them at MSRP first, and then we can start complaining. Well, I already did that, right? I said 8 gig needs to be 199, but we need to start bringing that, the prices more reasonable. And as manufacturing goes up, maybe this is somewhat of a new standard of pricing that we're going to have to wrap our heads around. I've thought about that a few times in the last couple of years, where, yeah, I don't want that to happen, but we'll see. And we'll see if we can actually build a PC with new parts around a console size, or console size price. So with that, thank you so much for watching and supporting, and supporting. I told you my brain's fried. Thank you so much for supporting Gray Overload. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, watch all my videos, hit the bell icon, all that fun stuff. It really does help out the channel. Until next time, God bless.